We are live here at the Kroger Marketplace, 5550 Bethelview Road in Cumming. My name is Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel, and we have had a great time tonight with an unbelievable crowd of UGA fans excited about the start of the upcoming season. And, you know, Jeff, I don't know if you're the same way that I am, but when you get a chance to hear what makes other people excited, what other people are looking forward to, I think it only increases my excitement for the season as well. This is clearly a fan base right now chomping at the bit. Obviously, the expectations help in that regard. There's obviously extra energy because of that. But this is a crowd both at the Crowbar behind us and all around us here at this beautiful Kroger Marketplace facility, which is an amazing shopping structure. There is an unbelievable level of enthusiasm for the start of the upcoming season. And, Jeff, I'm sure you've experienced that yourself here tonight.
Yeah, folks, Brandon and I were just talking, and last year's was, I think, a Ronald Acuna home run for hanging out with dog people, DawgNation, talking ball, talking Georgia football, a little bit of recruiting before the season opener, but I think this one is just going above and beyond. Again, we look like we got more people over here. We actually had our first, this is the first time anybody's ever called the dogs on one of our events before.
I think it very well may be.
We had a rowdy group of young ladies right here that called the dogs and got all the men excited about it.
It's been that kind of night here at the Kroger Marketplace in Cumming for sure. And obviously we'll talk about a lot of the things over the course of the next few minutes on video that we've talked about as part of our festivities here for our Kroger Kickoff here this evening. It's been great to have the entire DawgNation team on hand to celebrate and enjoy this tonight. Would you be okay, though, if before we kind of got too much further into the proceedings, if we did take care of a little business, because it just so happens that you and I are sitting here talking tonight. We were actually talking about this a moment ago with some of the folks who are here with us, that Georgia does get a 2021 commit today. That is newsworthy in the fact that it becomes the first member of the 2021 class for Georgia, and it's a name that I would say you'd have to be following pretty closely to know a lot about. Impressive-looking defensive back out of the state of South Carolina, but a new name for many of the people who are here with us at the Kroger and Cumming tonight, and certainly around our viewing world right now. So give us a little bit of an idea on what Georgia got today by adding a member of its 2021 class.
So Braylon Oliver, that's the name. Folks, he's rated as a 3-star safety right now, but I think that's because he's in a pocket of the world that makes Freeholm, maybe right around here in this area in Cumming, look like a big city. His coach, I spoke to him this morning, his coach had been at this school, Belton Honeypath, it's basically right across the state line, Georgia, South Carolina. They haven't had a player, they haven't sent a boy to the SEC in over 20 years. That's one of those woe statements for me with covering a lot of these guys like this. He's 6'3", he's 200 pounds, routinely clocks at 4.47, 4.45. It's been a Dan Lanning project for a while. Dan Lanning really started recruiting this young man heavily. Plays corner, plays safety, plays wide receiver for his high school team. He's a physical player if you see his highlight tape. And he's been a starter both ways at Belton Honeypath. And Belton Honeypath would have to be nicknamed the Bears, right? Would have to be, right? He's been a starter since his freshman year. He is the first public commitment for the 2021 class, and that in itself is some sort of news because Georgia normally gets ahead of its skis a little bit, Brandon, when it comes to recruiting classes. And this was a time, I can remember Georgia were taking recruits 24 months in advance of when they signed. And these guys are, I mean, Mr. Oliver, he's basically only 15 months to 16 months away from when he could sign. And that's the earliest, that's the latest Georgia's taken a year in advance recruit under Kirby Smart.
So Steve Highland watching our Facebook comment section says, I look nervous because when Jeff's talking, he's taking the microphone from me. And I wish that weren't as true as it is. When I don't have the microphone in my hand, when I'm not in control of the conversation, I guess I do get a little nervous here. He also said we don't have two microphones in the budget. That's not true. We've got 2 microphones we're just using this one for right now. But unfortunately, Steve, you're more right than you realize when you say that I get a little nervous once I relinquish control of the conversation. But, we've seen, Jeff, Georgia doing some work with its 2021 class now for a while in terms of making inroads and strides with Amarius Mims, who I know you've written about at DawgNation.com, Caleb Williams, the quarterback from the D.C., Beltway area that everybody knows about by now. And now we have a public commitment to go along with that. So the enthusiasm right now obviously rests with the 2020 class. So many of the questions we've been asked tonight at the Kroger Marketplace here in Cumming reflect that. And yet there's some work going on with this 2021 class too as well, and the commitment from Oliver is maybe the latest example of that.
Yeah, you mind if I take your microphone, sir?
By all means.
It's funny, you guys, I hope people notice this. Georgia, if you look at the 2020 class, I don't think they're going to take a true safety. Maybe just take one true safety.
What about James Williams?
2020 class, excuse me. In the 2020 class, they're going to go very light on safeties, which means in the 2021 class, they got to go hard on safeties. It's kind of a yin and yang type thing. And it is interesting for us to talk a little bit about 2021 recruiting, because I think the name Zachary Evans has came up a couple of times, and I'd say, brother, if we had some Kroger fuel points for every time we've been asked about Zachary Evans over the last week, we could bring everybody to Nashville for the season opener with us.
So Joshua Johansson in our Facebook comment section was talking about how the people behind us look like the college game day crowd. All we need is them to start making signs and holding them up. So just know this, y'all better behave yourself, because everybody on the world right now can see on video right now. So y'all just be careful with that. So we are going to go 2 microphones here. We'll have a little dueling microphone situation for sure. So good times here. Jake Perez talking about everybody having a good time at the Crowbar tonight. There's no doubt that's the case for sure as well. And, Jeff, one of the hot topics of conversation really all evening has been what we are going to see on the game, on the field once these games start being played. 2 Saturdays from now in Nashville against Vanderbilt, and so many of the people here with us tonight have plans in being there in Music City for that one. Absolutely, we're hearing some applause on that even right now. I mean, as you've been watching what's been going on at practice, you're talking to your people. A lot of the recruits that you talk to see more practice than someone like me is going to get a chance to see. What are the thoughts that are kind of rumbling around in your head? One of the final times we'll talk before the actual season begins. What's kind of on your mind about where Georgia is and where you expect to see it go from there?
Rapid fire, Brandon. I need to see if what we're hearing about Matt Landers is for real at wide receiver. I need to see if it's Cager or if it's George Pickens that makes the move over these next 2 or 3 weeks, moving forward closer to that Notre Dame game. And you need to see improved inside linebacker play. And G. Willikers, man, I hate to sound like Clark Kent here, but I'm really excited to see what Jermaine Johnson, Azeez Ojulari, and Nolan Smith can do, bringing it on the edge.
Yeah, I think so too. And when you bring up those wide receivers, there's obviously a lot of excitement about George Pickens, and the viral video catch that he made a couple of weeks ago only adds to that. I am of the big belief, though, that the Notre Dame game is an interesting test for him. 2 weeks after that at Tennessee against a secondary that I believe is actually pretty good. Tennessee's not one of the better teams in the SEC, but it is probably one of the better secondaries that Georgia will face all season long. To me, those 2 games, the non-conference versus the Irish, especially on the road against the Vols, that for me is the proving ground, the testing ground where this wide receiving core comes into place. And so I don't know if Pickens is your guy at Georgia before that, but I think the reasonable hope among Georgia fans is he could be that guy after that. By the time those key late September, early October games are done, heading towards the stretch run in November, especially for those games that'll be played in December, can he be that guy by then?
What I mean by that is I want to see him on the field, earning the right to get on the field, making the blocks, running the right routes, knowing what he's supposed to do, and then let that natural talent take over. And if he's doing that in the month of September, he's going to be a better player in the month of October. Here's the pickle Georgia is in with George Pickens. I know they want their receivers to block. I know they want these young freshmen to know what they're doing and not feel like they're swimming in the deep end. The other thing, though, is George Pickens can go get a ball on anybody. Go get a ball, fade ball, go get a ball in traffic. And that's a temptation, to putting a guy in there for spot spurts of brilliance when he's not ready to take on the whole scheme yet.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Let me pop over here and get a few more Facebook comments here a little bit as well as we talk about everything going on. Dante Green says maybe an okay secondary for Tennessee, but they could have offensive line trouble. That could also be true for Florida here as well in their Week 0 matchup against the Miami Hurricanes. You know, Jeff, I'm obviously not a Florida fan. I made that very clear by watching DawgNation daily and over the years. I've been pretty open and honest about that. However, I am as excited about this Week 0 matchup for Florida-Miami as anyone possibly could be, because it's at least real football again. I'll be tuning in, looking forward to watching Florida hopefully lose the game, but I'll admit I'm excited about seeing it.
There's so many places I could take that conversation, Brandon. I'm gonna say something that I think just sounds logical and right now. I think Florida's got enough juice to at least cover that spread or win that game. But that really only shows me that they're as good as maybe the 4th or 5th best team in the ACC. Everybody's ready for football. I don't know if that's the game where you start wondering how sharp the teeth are for the Gators against Miami just yet.
Yeah, I think it's one of those games where Florida probably has something to lose. I don't know that it has a ton to gain unless Felipe Franks clearly plays better. Mullen has told us, Dan Mullen, the Florida coach, has told us it'll be an improved version of Franks, but this is mostly based on what's been happening away from the watchful eye of fans and media behind closed doors. It's more of a show me, not tell me situation, and for Florida, that begins on Saturday night. I'll admit I'm looking forward to watching the game. We had a really good question a little earlier, and by the way, Kevin Jones checking in with a little Gator hater, which is kind of a nice thing to see. Kevin, appreciate that. We had somebody ask a really good question, Chad E. Daniel, a little earlier, about whether the Georgia's starters for Week 1 will be the same as they are for Week 4, and obviously Week 4 is an important game because that is the that is the Notre Dame game. So starter is a word that I push back on a little bit because for Georgia, who rotates so much, for me it's really more about your top 5, your top 6, more so than the 3 that might be on a field to start a game. But to answer Chad's question, I don't know that we've seen a lot of movement prior to Notre Dame. I think we've seen some, but odds are George Pickens is probably already working as a number 2 type receiver right now. In other words, he's probably among the top 6 at the moment. I don't know that we see a lot of changes on that before Georgia plays Notre Dame, but as you said a moment ago, or at least as I said a moment ago, I do think the Irish and then Tennessee are the chances for that movement to take place. If Pickens becomes this team's leading receiver, for instance, which is not unheard of for a freshman to do in modern times, by halfway through the season, we'll know that. If Dominic Blaylock's going to climb his way up depth charts, by about halfway through the season, we'll see some remnant, some evidence of that possibly happening. I don't know that we see that through 3 weeks, but through 6 weeks, I think there's a chance we do see it occur.
I think that wide receiver position is probably the most fascinating for Georgia this year, Brandon. And if you think there's one spot on the team where you need to wave the magic wand and the Bulldogs will get the services of an all-SEC player, is that the spot where you want to put it? Is that wide receiver, or is it another spot?
Well, I think when it comes to the national championship standard on the offensive side of the ball, that's really the only part of the Georgia offense that hasn't been national championship standard. In the 5-year history of the college football playoff, we've seen national champions have really good receivers. Now, for the most part, national champions are good across the board, but particularly dynamic when it comes to receivers. So if you give me the power to wave a magic wand and magically make something occur, dramatically upgrading Georgia's wide receiver core is probably one of the places I would choose to use some magic if I had some. I actually don't believe it's going to be all that difficult for Georgia to match what it did a year ago. 3 guys with about 500 yards. You add Nauta in with 400-plus yards as a tight end. Matching that total, I actually don't think is that difficult. Georgia's had a history of replacing wide receiver production now for a number of years. With the exception of Terry Godwin, pretty much every other top receiver on the Georgia team has, for the most part, regenerated itself every year for the last 3 or 4 years. They can do that again in 2019. But to be national championship level at that position group, I think you need an upgraded level of play, and that for me is the wait and see.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that, Brandon, because those guys are in the NFL and they're not there. And then the movement of Jeremiah J.J. Holloman also said something about the returning star power for Georgia. But you got to look at I use this term a lot, the instruments of how Georgia wins a football game. None of those guys had more than 5 catches in a game last year. Ridley, for his prototype and as what the NFL wants, he has in a receiver, He only had 2 games in his career where he caught more than 61 yards worth of balls. Georgia has had one receiver go over 100 yards in the last 2 seasons, and that was Mecole Hardman with 103 against South Carolina early this year. It's not a lot of production Georgia needs to replace. It's just that talent and that experience level. And I think Georgia's doing that with more experience, not more experience, but bigger and more talented bodies.
Enrique Murillo predicting that Miami might keep it close against Florida on Saturday night. Enrique, thanks for that prediction. That's going to be really fun to see. James Crump over in our Facebook comment section talking about the other side of the ball for a moment and what might be expected from the Georgia defensive line. I've been asked this question a lot, and the conversation's been ongoing a lot tonight here at the Kroger Marketplace in Cumming. Jeff, do you expect a dramatically upgraded Georgia defensive line? Because, and so many people here tonight have said this, and I've said this obviously a ton on DawgNation Daily over the course of the last few months, for as much attention has been paid to not getting enough sacks and not getting enough tackles for loss. And those are legitimate issues for Georgia. The inability to be great when it comes to stopping the run, for me, is not a secondary issue. It is almost as significant as those other issues. So many people here tonight have been wondering, well, with all of that in mind, is the Georgia defensive line here this season, is it going to be upgraded? Is it going to be more closely aligned with what we think of a championship expectation? How about your thoughts on front seven a little bit, but try to keep it just the defensive line, where we know the linebacker core has a chance to be better, but to the guys who call themselves defensive linemen, what's the expectations for an upgrade there?
Well, who did they lose off the interior of the defensive line? Jay Hayes. They lost Jonathan Ledbetter out on the edge. You start looking at Georgia's pieces from this year to last year, and here's what I see. And these are not huge quantum leaps for this. It seems relatively self-evident to me that Jordan Davis is going to be better this year.
Yeah.
You heard the reports
already
coming out
good,
of camp.
but even better.
You heard the reports coming out of camp that this is in the best shape they've ever seen him. Do we expect a guy like Devontae Wyatt to make a surge and be a lot better? I think he will. Do I see a guy like Tyler Clark being very healthy, being a lot better? I think he will. Is Malik Herring going to be a lot better? I think he will. Those guys are just going to all collectively get a lot better. Now, is Trayvon Walker a situational pass rusher? Maybe late in the season, I think he can be that. Can Azeez Ojulari bring it? Can some combination of Adam Anderson, Jermaine Johnson, and Nolan Smith provide pass rush off the edge? You know, we're not looking for, I think Georgia fans are not looking for Clemson's defensive line from 2018 reincarnate. They just need a worthy, strong SEC front for Georgia. And then when you got to calculate them in the inside linebacker play. Monty Rice starting more than 5 games. Quay Walker, Nakobe Dean, Channing Tindall, Tay Crowder. Those guys have got to get a little bit better. Otherwise, the Georgia coaching staff is not squeezing out what they need to when everybody needs to do more.
This is Jeff Sintel, DawgNation's recruiting insider. My name is Brandon Adams. Welcome into this very special DawgNation video broadcast live here at the Kroger Marketplace in Cumming. We're on Bethelview Road. It's our Kroger Kickoff. We're starting the season. We've had hundreds of Georgia fans here in the room with us here tonight. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Huge crowd on hand to have a great time talking some Georgia football. If you couldn't be here in person, we're going to keep this going with you on video for the next couple of minutes and give you a chance to enjoy all of that. You got a prediction for who leads Georgia in sacks this year, an individual name? If I forced you to pick only one, do you have a pick?
Azeez Ojulari.
I believe Azeez would likely be my pick on that as well. I think as we get closer to the start of the year, though, the more I am of the belief that for the additional number of sacks I expect Georgia to get, the additional number of tackles for loss that I expect Georgia to get, and Georgia fans hope Georgia gets, for me, this is more about everybody doing a little more than he did a year ago. And for Azeez, that'll be certainly easier because he spent most of last year injured. For me, it's about everybody doing a little bit more, to borrow the do more phrase that's been kicked around all offseason long, more so than really anybody getting to double digits. If I had to predict, I don't believe that Georgia has a double-digit sack guy. I don't believe that Georgia has a guy go 20 tackles for loss this year. But I do think that and we had guys in the league go do 20 a year ago. I do believe that everybody can do a little bit more, and that's where I think that your upgrade's coming from. You're going to get more sacks for Georgia this season. You're going to get more tackles for loss, but I do truly believe it's more likely to be by committee than having any superstar emerge the way that Derek Barnett would have for Tennessee in 2014 or Myles Garrett would have for Texas A&M around the same time. That's not that kind of breakthrough, I don't believe, for anybody on this Georgia roster right now.
So 2 points on that topic. One of them is I buy what you're selling there a little bit, Brandon. I think Georgia needs to find someone that can equate what DeAndre Walker did last year. And Walker was only 6.5 sacks. It wasn't like he was a ginormous number. But I think where Georgia needs to show improvement and havoc is they need to be the gap from their alpha rusher in DeAndre Walker, which it was a year ago, the number 1 guy and the number 2 guy. There doesn't need to be as big a gap between the Superman of the pass rush and then the Batman of the pass rush. There needs to be less drop-off and there needs to be more guys. The second point I'd like to make, you did some good numbers, Brandon, where you were looking at true freshmen and sacks and guys that came into the league and really blew everybody's skirt up with how well they played. The one thing I would like to add to a lot of that material you shared on DawgNation.com is the one thing that feels different here is the quality of players. The guys that were getting a lot of those sacks were maybe at not the Alabamas of the world, the Georgias of the world, the LSUs of the world. They were coming into some of those lesser teams in the conference. And when you have Georgia here bringing in elite pass rushers like a Nolan Smith, like a Jermaine Johnson, and Azeez Ojulari, still a redshirt freshman this year, especially in terms of Mike Griffin and all those watch lifts he's going to put out. I've got to see Georgia. I got to see a Georgia guy do some more right there, because Georgia's going to get an opportunity to feature a 5-star player, a national elite player, where they'll get the reps to put up those numbers this year. Because Alabama, when they was bringing in those 5-star freshmen, they were waiting behind a couple of guys. I think that's what's a little different there with history and precedence.
Got a couple minutes left as part of our Kroger Kickoff special on the DawgNation video channels. A lot has been said in the comment section tonight, echoing the conversation that was ongoing this evening at the Kroger Marketplace and coming about 5-star running back Zachary Evans. I know you've been asked, and now answered this question a million times over the last couple of days, but for the people tuning in, what do you say to those who are on what they think is commitment watch for Evans this week?
I think commitment watch and signing watch for Evans is going to last about 5 more months. I think it's going to last until December. I would say Georgia, this is what people want to know. Is Georgia in a good spot to get a commitment and then sign a guy like Zachary Evans? I do think so.
Yeah.
Does that mean other schools can't flip him or take him away or whatever? No, it doesn't mean that at all. I think this is a little different recruitment than what folks are used to. I think maybe the warning label on this recruitment, or this disclaimer, needs to be there a little bit. Maybe not so much as a John Emery, because I think this is a different situation. But I think Zachary Evans and Georgia, while the cards and everything can change, but as of right now, Georgia positions itself, it looks like, to be in very good shape with the nation's number 1 running back.
Wyatt Fielded in our Facebook comment section asked about Channing Tindall, and I was happy to hear Kirby Smart, when he spoke to reporters this week, address Tindall and address Quay Walker a little bit. And for me, when you see Nakobe Dean dealing with a little bit of a, as Kirby's called it, banged up situation, there's been some talk about it being an ankle. When you see that going on, my mind immediately goes to, well, does this create an opportunity for a Tindall? Does it create an opportunity for Walker to maybe impress coaches if indeed Nakobe Dean's not been a full go during practice? And I don't know, how much he's practiced and how much he's been going through, but he's at least banged up a little bit. The question comes in for Channing Tindall. I mean, how much is your eye still on these 2018 linebackers like Walker and like Tindall, who at one point in time were quite hyped themselves, with Nakobe Dean coming in and stealing a little bit of that thunder, and my expectation is he's going to be a big part of the defensive story for Georgia this year. Does that change the original calculus for what we thought Tindall, who the question's about, but I'll throw Walker into that same discussion as well?
These are Georgia problems, Brandon, and I mean, it's a situation where this is where Georgia's at. If it's a situation with Nakobe Dean, a top 15 player in the country, if he's not able to go, remember in years past, that would be a blow to Georgia's optimism for the defense. And now if Nakobe Dean's not getting the reps where he can get first-team reps and get in there early, Georgia's fallback is 2 older players who were top 30 prospects in the country of a year ago. Let's not forget Monty Rice. Let's not forget Tay Crowder. that inside linebacker spot is filled with about 4 or 5 names that are all going to play good football for Georgia. They're all going to play winning football for Georgia. It's just a matter of who's going to deserve the reps early on. And other schools, if they're 5-star freshmen, I can think of Owen Pappoe as a good example at Auburn. He's healthy. He's probably going to start for Auburn. But if something happened to him where he would be slowed in camp, there's not an immediate guy right after him that's going to bring juice and excitement. And for Georgia fans, if the Nakobe Dean train doesn't start rolling in week 1 or week 2, that just means that the Channing Tindall train, the Quay Walker train, the Tay Crowder train, maybe it's their time at that point.
Yeah, that could be very well said. We're going to get ready to get out of here in just a moment. Matt Rukavina bringing up Zamir White. That's another one of those names, Jeff, as we head towards the start of the season. You really can't do much to ramp down the excitement and the anticipation for Zamir White's debut. At this point in time, I think Georgia fans are ready to see number 3 out there on that field, toting the rock for Georgia. And against Vanderbilt, I think they're going to see quite a bit of that.
Yeah, so I think the smartest thing to do with Zamir, Mr. White, is just wait for him to be Zamir White this year, much like the way Nick Chubb was in 2016. Nick Chubb was an all-SEC running back in 2016, bouncing back that first season from the knee injury. And then in 2017, he was a high draft pick, an All-American, one of the best backs in the country, even though he never carried the ball more than 20 times in a game his senior year. I think Georgia's going to see Zamir White this year in 2019, and that's going to look pretty good. And then I think Zeus is going to come out in 2020 when he'll be a full year recovered from that injury.
Before we get ready to go, you got a final thought? What you want to leave this audience with here at the Kroger Marketplace incoming, or anybody who's watching us right now? You got anything you want to say?
I just want to try and paint a picture for you guys. This is always one of the most fun things we do, because I'm sitting here, we're talking Georgia in the middle of a grocery store, and there's a bar back there. This is like a country music song, is it not? We need somebody's dog dying and a truck breaking down, and then everything will be great. But one of my favorite parts is there's some, Joe Cumming, Georgia, walking in, or Jane Cumming, Georgia. They'll round the corner, and they'll see all these DawgNation people, and they didn't know about it, and their jaws will drop, and they're like, what is going on here in the middle of Kroger here coming at the marketplace? It is so fun seeing people, the look of astonishment on their face when the world-famous Brandon Adams is here talking about Georgia football.
I said this before the show started. It's one of the things that our friends at Kroger have always been so great at, is giving us a great home to have these kinds of conversations. They love Georgia. They love college football. They love this kind of stuff. So giving us a place to have these kinds of evenings like that's the kind of thing they're just really good at welcoming us about. And I'm really, really thrilled about that. Jeff, it's been fun to be able to talk this with you tonight. For Connor Riley, who's been here on site, making all this run as well.
Connor.
Appreciate him. Our buddy Mike Griffith is roaming around right now. We appreciate him as always, too. And for everybody here tonight, thanks for helping us kick off the season in style as a part of our Kroger Kickoff. Y'all enjoy the evening. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily. And as we head toward, thank you very much, and as we head towards next week and the start of the 2019 season, we're glad to kick it off with you. Thanks for being a part of our Kroger Kickoff, everybody.